Okay, everybody, let's get ready for our intro into GameMaker. So you can see I've just opened GameMaker up, and what I can see on this page is some of the old files that I've been working on, as well as 3 buttons that will let me create a new project or open an old one if I don't see it listed here, or import a project from somewhere else. We're going to start just with new, so I'm going to click on this new button, and we're going to be making a game. So I'm going to click on game right here. These are some tutorials. We'll actually probably play around with some of these later on, but for right now, we're going to start with a nice blank game. So I'm going to click on that. We want to give our game a name. These generic names can be confusing after a while, so I'm just going to kind of highlight blank game here. We're going to make a side-scrolling shooter game, so I'm just going to call this scrolling shooter. And then we're just going to click on let's go. So you can see that right now my assets browser, your assets browser is probably over here on the left. And then your inspector is probably over here on the right. Now I like having my assets over here. So basically what I do is I'm just going to take my mouse, I'm going to click on the assets folder, this tab I mean, I'm going to slide it over here to the left, and now you can see the inspectors there. I'm going to take my assets tab, I'm going to click and drag and slide it over there. Okay. And so now I've got this laid out. Oops, I clicked on the wrong one. Let's try that again. I'm going to bring the inspector over here. There we go. All right, so this is sort of what I want to have set up. You can obviously leave yours the way you want it, but feel free to move these around as you want. I do not need to see the messages, so I'm just going to click on these 2 double arrows right here and close that out. And for right now, I also don't need to see the inspector, so I'm going to click on these 2 double arrows and I'm going to close that out. You also have the option up here of clicking on this collapse and expand, and this will collapse all of them or bring them all back. And then notice that it will still do the same thing here, right? So you can kind of play around with this as you need to. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is laptop mode on. And if I mouse over that, you can see that it's going to let me use some keyboard shortcuts to help me move around a little bit. So you're definitely going to want that on. Okay, so the inspector, like I said, I don't need to see that right now. I want my workspace to be a little bit bigger, and I'm taking a look at my asset browser right now. And in my asset browser, I've got all these tabs, and these tabs have little triangles, and if I click on the triangle, it will open up to reveal what's inside there. And you'll notice that right now we do have one room. GameMaker by default will create a room for you. And then we've got all these other folders. Now, a lot of these we don't actually need. So I'm going to delete them to just make my life a little bit easier and more organized. Animation curves we don't need. I'm going to click on that and then press delete on the keyboard, which is up in the upper right hand corner. I'm going to hit OK on that and delete that. We don't need extensions for this game. I'm going to delete that. We might use fonts. We will not use notes. So I'm going to delete notes. We will definitely use objects, but probably not particle systems. So I'm going to delete that. We will probably use paths, definitely rooms. We will not use scripts for this game, so I'll delete that. We will not use sequences for this game. I'm going to delete that. We will not use shaders for this game. I'm going to delete that. We will use sounds. We will use sprites. We probably won't use tile sets for this game, so I'll delete that. And we will probably end up using timelines. So basically, these are the folders that we're definitely going to be using in this game. If you accidentally deleted a folder, no worries. You can just click on plus up here. And then you'll be able to, oh, it doesn't look like you can do it from here. But you can right click and do create. Nope, never mind. All right, well, we'll figure that part out. I'm not too worried about it. We'll always be able to organize things in different ways. So basically what we want to do is we want to create some sprites. And then these sprites we're going to assign to an object. So the sprite is just a picture. The object is the actual thing that you're going to program. And then we place the objects into rooms, and that's how we end up making our game. Rooms are kind of like levels. So if I click on this triangle with the room, you'll see that I've got room 1 right here. And this little home means it's the first screen that comes up when you start playing your game. And that makes sense since it's the only room we've got right now. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that room and open it up. And then I'm going to open up my inspector and take a look at some of these properties. So right now, what I see is the name of the room is called room 1. I don't like that name. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to call this instead level 1. Notice that when you name an asset, you cannot use spaces. So if I were to just try to put a space here, all right, it tells me that I cannot do that. So what I'm going to do is I can either type in level and then 1 without a space, or I can do an underscore, which is up at the top of the keyboard in between the 0 key and the plus and equals key. I'll hold down shift and hit my underscore and do a level 1 like that. Either way is fine. It all depends on which way you like better, but now you'll see that it accepts that name, and it has changed the name to level 1 over here in my rooms. Okay. So as far as the room settings, we're going to keep these. This is how big the room is. It's 1366. It's 1,366 pixels wide, 768 pixels high. So we're going to go ahead and stay with that. We don't want the room to be persistent. We will clear the display buffer for right now. That is fine. So all these settings are good. We don't need to worry about viewports and cameras. We don't need to worry about room physics for this game. So right now, this looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and move the inspector back over. And here's my level 1 room. I don't really need to see it anymore. I can click on workspace and leave level 1 room open, or I can click on this X and close it all together and just open it up later when I'm ready. If I have to open it back up, I just come right here. Okay, so either way is acceptable. I'm going to close it because I don't want to get this layers in my way right now, so I'm just going to worry about this right now. All right, and like I said, I'm going to close the inspector, get that out of my way. Now, we need to go ahead and start making our sprites. And for the time being, we're just going to do a really quick sprite, and then we'll worry about adding some details later. So to make a sprite, there's a couple of ways to do this. Number one is I can click on this plus and just come down here to sprites and create a sprite that way. I can also right-click on sprites, go to create, and just go to sprite here. And then notice that I've got a keyboard shortcut that says Alt-S. I can create a sprite by doing Alt-S. Okay, so any of those ways is fine. We'll probably just sort of get in the habit of going here to the plus. And notice that I selected the sprite folder. I'm going to click on the sprite and hit create. And notice how it created a sprite for me in that sprite folder. If it's in the wrong spot, I can always drag it and move it around to any of the folders that I want. So, feel free to go ahead and do that. Now, what we've got here is our sprite window, okay? And we're going to go ahead and do some things to change here. So first thing we always want to get in the habit of is renaming objects. So I'm going to click on where it says Sprite 1. And in GameMaker, you cannot have two things with the exact same name. So this is going to be our hero or our player. We can't have a sprite player and an object name player. The GameMaker will get confused. So to make sure that we have things different, I'm going to type SPR at the beginning and then player afterwards. Now notice how I did this. When I start a new word, I capitalize it. So if I wanted to do player 1, I would capitalize it like that. Or like I said, you can do the underscores, whatever is visually easier for you to look at. So I'm just going to call this sprite player or SPR player. Okay. Right now it's saying its width is 64 and its height is 64. If we wanted to change that, we could click on that button right there. And then right here, I'd say, all right, well, it doesn't need to be quite this size. So we'll say maybe 32 and the height will be maybe 16. Now notice that when I typed the 32 up here, it changed the height for me. That's because the maintain aspect ratio is turned on. If I wanted this to be rectangular, I would need to turn this off, and then I can make the height 16 and make the height independent of the width. Okay, and then I just hit apply, and notice now I've got those changes there. Okay, so basically what we want to do now is we have the choice of either editing the image or importing an image. So if I've drawn an image in another program like Illustrator or Photoshop or something else, I can import it. But we're going to go ahead and click on Edit Image, and we come into the editor. Up here at the top, I can zoom in and out. So this is my canvas, right? If I hit the equals, this is what it will look like in the actual game. That's the actual size. So you can see that we were zoomed in. And then this will be a center fit, so we can kind of see this will fit in the whole screen. Notice that when I kind of zoom out, how much smaller the little block is getting, because this represents 1 pixel on the screen, okay? And for right now, I'm going to have a really basic sprite. So you can see I've got some drawing tools over here. I've got a paintbrush, which I can just kind of draw like that. If I don't like what I've done, I can hit Control Z and undo it. Okay, I've got squares, rectangles, right, circles, okay, triangles, or I should say straight line. Oh, no, there's the triangle right there, right? So all these different tools, arcs, text, and so on. For right now, I'm going to grab the paint bucket, which is my fill tool. I'm going to fill this whole thing yellow. So that'll just be my player. And like I said, later on, we will go in and we will edit this to make it look better. But for right now, let's keep it simple. And I'm going to click on the X up here. And notice I've got my yellow Sprite player. Notice that over here, this little yellow icon is what this looks like. So if I were to edit this again and change my color by clicking on it to black and choose a circle and put a circle in the middle of this, right? Notice how that updates over here in my asset browser, okay? So I can go ahead and close out my Sprite player, and that's good to go. And basically what I want to do is be able to turn this into an object. So to do that, I'm going to come over here to Objects, click on the plus, and I'm going to choose Object and hit Create. We are going to call this Object Player, so OBJ and then Player. So that's how I can make sure that this is called Player, but it's a different name than my Sprite player, okay? You can see right now that my object player has been renamed. What I want to do is I want to assign it my Sprite player. So I do that over here in Sprite. It says no Sprite. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on my Sprites folder, or I can click on this little triangle right here. And since I've only got one Sprite, that's the only one I can choose from. And now my object has a Sprite associated with it, okay? In my room, I can now drop this object. So I go to my level 1 room. All right. And you can see I've got some different things. This is going to actually go in instances. And I'm just going to drag this object player from my asset browser over into the room. So if I were to click on play, it would go ahead and start opening up into a web browser. And I would see my object right here in the window. I can't do anything because I haven't done any programming. But I've got my Sprite and my object in the game ready to go, and I can start programming. So we're going to go ahead and end this video here and then pick it up with the next one later on.